Economic Highlights 2016 Review. Possible scenarios when Vietnam enter new context of trade globalization. Hello and welcome to this edition of BizLine brought to you by VTV International. This is the final episode of BizLine for 2016. So in the following segment, we have a review of the Vietnamese economy during the past year.
Vietnam integrated further into the world market in 2016, with important free trade agreements being signed or taking effect. On February the 1st, the text of the EU-Vietnam Free Trade Agreement was published, following the announcement of the conclusion of the negotiations. Despite the two sides planning to sign the trade deal in 2016, the signing has still not been carried out. On February the 4th, the Trans-Pacific Partnership Agreement, or TPP, was officially signed in Auckland, New Zealand. With the vow of President-elect Donald Trump that the U.S. will withdraw from the TPP, whether it can take effect by 2018 as planned remains unclear. Vietnam, however, confirmed that it would continue its integration process, regardless the fate of the trade pact.
Không tham gia TPP hay là có tham gia TPP thì chúng ta vẫn là một cái nền kinh tế tiếp tục hội nhập sâu rộng vào quốc tế.
In addition, the free trade agreement between Vietnam and the Eurasian Economic Union officially took effect on October the 5th, opening up more opportunities for Vietnamese enterprises to access a larger potential market, with total GDP reaching over $2 trillion.
2016 witnessed Vietnam's continuous efforts in improving the business environment, highlighted by the government's issuance of two resolutions to improve business environment and support business operation. In addition, a range of procedures related to tax, customs, or investment were cut and simplified during the past year, helping enterprises save time and reduce costs. Drafting amendments of 12 laws on investment and business were also submitted to the National Assembly, aiming to create a more favorable conditions for enterprises. Thanks to such efforts, Vietnam experienced a 9-point jump to rank 82nd among the 190 economies in terms of the business environment in 2016, according to the World Bank Doing Business report released in October. Meanwhile, with better business environment, the country saw a record high of new companies established in 2016, with more than 110,000.
Vietnam posted a 6.21% GDP growth in 2016, higher than the rates recorded by many developing countries in Asia and Southeast Asia. Foreign currency reserves hit a record $41 billion, while revenues to the state budget met targets. The disbursement of foreign direct investment hit a record $15.8 billion. Export value increased 6.8%, and export surplus reached $2.68 billion, despite losses of 1% and 0.3% loss of GDP caused by natural disasters and the mass fish deaths in the central region, respectively. In 2016, fruit and vegetable exports set a milestone as it exceeded rice exports for the very first time. As of December the 15th, the export turnover of vegetables and fruits reached $2.3 billion, while rice turnover stood at $2.1 billion. This was also the first time the agriculture sector has not grown in the past 30 years since the đổi mới or renovation process. Still, the sector recovered with a growth rate of 1.36%.
Vietnam achieved significant results in 2016 in the divestment process in state-owned companies, although it did not reach the target. According to the Ministry of Finance, as of November, equitization plans of 56 enterprises were approved. Meanwhile, over $156 million of state capital were divested, earning an amount of $288.5 million. A part of the government's determination to boost the divestment process was that it asked the State Capital Investment Corporation, or SCIC, to sell its stake in 10 large enterprises, including Vietnam Milk, Sabeco, and Habeco. On December the 12th, SCIC auctioned a 9% stake comprising 130.63 million shares in Vietnam Milk at the Ho Chi Minh City Stock Exchange. At the end of the session, 5.4 of the 9% stake was sold with a value of nearly $496 million.
We have just reviewed some of the economic highlights over the past year. Up next in our crosstalk, we'll talk about the possible scenarios when Vietnam enter new context of trade globalization. Hot issues dominating economic discussions in the past year are Brexit and the rise of populism in politics, especially in the US after Donald Trump was elected the new president, which appears to have added strength to the voices protesting globalization. Protectionism is about to rise. Trade and investment are losing momentum on a global scale, and gradually they are no longer a top strength of economic globalization. Meanwhile, Vietnam has confirmed its commitments to liberalize trade and will further integrate into the global economy in the years to come. Will there be any risks or challenges for Vietnam in the new context of global trade? We look for the answer with our guest today, Dr. Trần Việt Thái, Deputy Director General of the Institute for Foreign Policy and Strategic Studies, Ministry of Foreign Affairs. But first, let's take a look at the following report.
World trade grew slower than expected in 2016, expanding by just 1.7%, well below the April forecast of 2.8%, according to the latest WTO estimates. With expected global GDP growth of 2.2% in 2016, WTO Director General Roberto Avezzo is concerned in the context of growing anti-globalization sentiments.
We announced new figures showing a dramatic slowdown in trade growth around the world, and with growth this year set to be the lowest since the crisis in 2008. So this is a wake-up call.
On trade, I am going to issue our notification of intent to withdraw from the Trans-Pacific Partnership, a potential disaster for our country.
Trump's statement raised experts' concerns at the return of protectionism. Previously, people's expectation of job losses due to globalization and trade liberalization policies is considered the core element that led to Brexit.
Mà với chủ nghĩa bảo hộ này, với cái chủ nghĩa dân tộc cực đoan này, rồi cái thái độ chống lại tự do hóa này mà thực sự nó trở thành một cái hiện tượng lớn thì nó sẽ có tác động tiêu cực đến thương mại, đầu tư thế giới và quá trình phục hồi kinh tế thế giới.
Việt Nam là một cái nền kinh tế mà định hướng xuất khẩu và hàng hóa của chúng ta xuất khẩu ra nước ngoài. Cái xu hướng bảo hộ thương mại gần đây thì nó rõ ràng là một cái thách thức đối với các doanh nghiệp Việt Nam.
WTO's latest report shows that its members introduced 182 new trade restrictive measures for the reporting period covering mid-October 2015 to mid-October 2016. While this represents a reduction in the monthly figure compared to the peak in 2015, this figure remains worryingly high given continuing global economic uncertainty and the WTO's downward revision of its trade forecasts.
Thế giới và khu vực ASEAN đang phải đối mặt với những thách thức to lớn trên nhiều lĩnh vực về an ninh, kinh tế, lương thực, tiền tệ, biến đổi khí hậu, chủ nghĩa bảo hộ đã có nguy cơ trở lại, vân vân.
Thank you very much, Dr. Trần Việt Thái, for joining our Bizline program. Given the above-mentioned events, Prime Minister Nguyễn Xuân Phúc, during a recent conference in Hanoi, warned of the risk of returning global trade protectionism. So what are your assessments on this?
The rise of the protectionism is not only in the region, but also across the world. You see that the negative impacts of the globalization process now have been vividly impressed by many people, many countries, especially in developed countries. So there is natural reactions against these negative impacts, and you see this is the rise of protectionism, especially after Trump won the presidential election in the US this year. Trump haven't assumed his post as president of the United States, but what he said already having impacts upon us. The fourth quarter of 2016 investment index already going down. We see the immediate impacts of this kind of statement, and you will see more will come in the 2017 or the years to come if this rising protectionism trend will continue.
Despite the risk of the comeback of trade protectionism, trade liberalization seems still maintain its foothold in Asia, especially in emerging and developing markets. Can these be seen as a move to adapt to changes brought by increasing barriers from developed economies?
To answer this question, we have to come back to the nature of globalization. Enterprises seeking profits anywhere in the world, which is beneficial for them. So you see, globalization means moving out of manufacturing sectors from developed worlds to developing countries. And you see in East Asia or in developing worlds, there are more winners than losers. But in developed countries, there are more losers than winners.
Take a look at the TPP, living up to its reputation as the highest standard new free trade agreement in terms of both breadth and depth. However, the TPP has been rejected by the anti-globalized U.S. new government. Considering the low likelihood of TPP ratification, what obstacles can be seen to the Vietnamese economy?
In the context of rising protectionism and especially with regard to TPP, Vietnam will face some obstacles as follows. Number one, the expected trade diversion and investment will be stopped. This is very important because with TPP in place, we hope that more investment, more trade will come. But now without TPP, I think this expectation cannot be met. Number two, that market access, especially from the US market, will be limited. Those who already invested here to expect that in the next 2 or 3 years to come, we will have market access to the US market, will have to recalculate their investment. Another one is the driving force for reforms, because TPP is not only market access, but behind TPP, if you look at the composition of 30 chapters of TPP, you see a lot of things very much resemble with what we are doing in reforms in Vietnam. So without TPP, the motive or the driving force for domestic reforms will be less, and that will be a big obstacle and challenge for us. Last but not least is looking at some localities in Vietnam. Many provinces like Hà Nội, Bắc Ninh, Bắc Giang, Quảng Ninh or Bình Dương, Đồng Nai, for example, they already developed their socio and economic development programs, basing on an expectation that by 2018 or by 2019, TPP will be implemented and they will have a lot of investment. But now no more, and they have to readjust their policy, their programs, and that affects a lot.
Mm-hmm. Under the context, could there be a chance that the Regional Comprehensive Economic Partnership, or RCEP, and other free trade agreements such as the EVFTA, KVFTA, will replace the TPP to bring benefits to Vietnam?
TPP has a lot of meanings, as I just mentioned before. EVFTA or KVFTA, they are high standard. They are new type of FTA or the fourth generation FTA, but cannot replace TPP in many terms, both strategic terms or in technical terms. RCEP is another case. It's still in the process of negotiation, and some countries like China want to take a lead. FTAAP is another case. It's still very young. It has just finished the common strategic study, not yet enter the period of negotiation. So it's still very far from existence. I can see there is a big gap in reality about FTA, and no one can replace TPP. But one thing for sure, free trade will continue. And Vietnam have finished so far 14 FTAs altogether. Without TPP, the process of integration of Vietnam may be slower, but it will continue as normal.
One of the biggest issues for Vietnamese enterprises lies at their capacity to protect themselves in both international and global markets. While facing barriers from demanding markets, Vietnamese goods also found it hard to counteract unfairly priced and subsidized imported goods.
Đại diện cho cái ngành sản xuất trong nước. Thứ hai là cái vấn đề là nguồn lực đi kiện. Cái công cụ kiện phòng vệ thương mại không phải là một công cụ miễn phí. Để sử dụng được công cụ này thì các doanh nghiệp phải có tiền. Và cuối cùng một cái vấn đề cực kỳ quan trọng đấy là để mà đi kiện được thì anh phải tập hợp tất cả những cái bằng chứng để chứng minh cho cái cáo buộc của mình đối với hàng hóa nước ngoài nhập khẩu vào Việt Nam.
10 years since the country opened its doors through joining the World Trade Organization, Vietnamese goods face roughly 100 trade investigations overseas, but local authorities have only enforced measures to tackle 6 such cases in Vietnam.
Những cái nước có kinh nghiệm người ta có những cái chiến lược rất bài bản cho việc truyền thông. Ví dụ trước cái vụ kiện đấy người ta sẽ tiến hành những cái chiến dịch truyền thông như thế nào để gọi là raise cái vấn đề lên, để nêu cái vấn đề lên và tạo dư luận xã hội, tạo ra một cái sự ủng hộ trong bản thân cộng đồng doanh nghiệp.
Under the upcoming effective FTAs, Vietnam will remove 95% of taxes on imported goods by 2018. This requires Vietnamese enterprises to better protect themselves with improvements in personnel capacities and lawyering skills.
Qua theo dõi thì chúng tôi cũng thấy được là cái đội ngũ luật sư và chuyên gia tư vấn liên quan đến vấn đề phòng vệ thương mại ở Việt Nam thì cũng đang được cải thiện dần dần.
The fall of the TPP and the comeback of trade protectionism also means that Vietnamese goods are facing new obstacles to trade, dominated by complicated non-tariff barriers. Have businesses been aware and prepared for this?
Let me divide the obstacle into two groups. Number one is objective, and number two is subjective. About subjective obstacles for the businesses, they need resources, human resources, who can speak English, who can know legal requirement in the destinations, and they need to know more about international practice. They must have better corporate governance, more transparent finance management. The objective is the complicated environment around Vietnam. The rising protectionism. I am also very hopeful because Prime Minister Nguyễn Xuân Phúc, since he assumed his power, already started the startup programs. And we see positive side. For example, this year, more and more newly established enterprises already enter the market. But this is very new, and 97% of the Vietnamese enterprises are small and medium-sized, or even super small.
What can the government do to help?
So far, the government has done quite well because they have resources. But if they are only actor in the process of integration, it means failure for the society. And the government can do the leading role by laying out, for example, legal foundation. They can help training. They can help the businessmen understand better about the world situation, the rule of laws, and about the environment, both political environment as well as business environment in other countries. But in the end, who are the key actors in that process? It must be the businessmen or enterprises. And having the learning effect is very important in this process, I can say.
With so many imponderables in the global trade, do you think Vietnam's integration process in 2016-2025 will face more obstacles?
This is really important period for Vietnam. We already implementing ASEAN Economic Community. 2017 will be APEC 17. 2020 will be BOGO goals. We expect more obstacles to come. When the society, the economy of Vietnam is more open, if we are not well prepared, we can lose right on our market. Last but not least, the key for the success will be not the government side. The best way to measure the success of integration is how much happiness the people feel when integrating, and how much benefit the enterprises can get in that process.
Vietnam officially joined the WTO in 2007, a milestone for Vietnam's global economic integration. In 2006, FDI into Vietnam stood at over $10 billion and total export revenue was some $40 billion. In 2016, FDI exceeded $24 billion, while total export revenue reached nearly $180 billion.
Vietnam committed to several reforms when it acceded to the WTO and has been implementing these reforms. And that, I think, is one of the reasons why Vietnam has made such impressive growth, has experienced such impressive growth over this period.
However, trade liberalization does not always result in a win-win scenario. 1 year after joining the ASEAN Economic Community, both import and export between Vietnam and other ASEAN member countries dropped. More importantly, while Vietnam's export revenue declined by some 6%, import revenue from ASEAN went down by only about 2%, a VCCI representative pointed out at a recent event.
Ở phía Việt Nam thì năm 2015 đến năm 2016 chúng ta lại vẫn đang có tiếp các cái bước giảm thuế theo cam kết trong AEC. Mà đến bây giờ chúng ta mới phải giảm, mới phải loại bỏ, trong khi các bạn đã loại bỏ rồi. Thì chúng ta loại bỏ tiếp như vậy thì các bạn có thể tận dụng cái cơ hội loại bỏ tiếp này.
Vietnamese enterprises like the preparation is another reason.
Không chỉ là liên quan đến AEC mà ngay cả các hiệp định như WTO hay là như TPP thì nói chung là VCCI luôn luôn thường xuyên có cái khảo sát. Và những cái kết quả khảo sát thì khẳng định một điều là biết thì nhiều nhưng mà hiểu thì ít. Doanh nghiệp Việt Nam chưa chuẩn bị tốt, đặc biệt là vấn đề khai thác thông tin, tìm hiểu thông tin mà chỉ là chạy theo phong trào, chỉ tìm hiểu bên ngoài.
To help enterprises better seize opportunities from AEC, VCCI announced a website on AEC for businesses in the past week. It has information on legal documents, Vietnam's AEC implementing documents, and tariff search.
Besides the risks and obstacles, what are the greatest benefits that trade globalization brings about to Vietnam since the milestone year of 2007?
Talking about benefits of globalization, people can choose more imported products, or you can see domestically produced with, I think, competitive price. And you see a better investment in infrastructure. Manufacturing sector is now developing and is increasing. That created jobs. We see a better life, but we also see a positive level of pressure in competition, especially among the enterprises, a stronger in capacity and better in competitiveness.
Mm-hmm. Many experts say that not only has Vietnam's participation in WTO not fully reached the country's expectations, the country has faced more integration difficulties arise from integration. So is there any fear that Vietnam will fall into the trade liberalization trap once the country has not been well prepared for the new context of integration?
The case of entering into WTO bring about a lot of lessons for Vietnam, both positive and negative. Before joining WTO, many people and many investors have too high expectations. They invested a lot, but in fact, we digested too little. There is big gap between registered FDI and implemented FDI. One of the reasons why, because the bottleneck of infrastructure structure in Vietnam. Now, after I think one more decade, the infrastructure in Vietnam is much better developed. And we do hope with this better development, we can digest more. Another lesson from WTO is that after joining TPP, we have experienced more and more anti-dumping cases. These kind of things will happen more regularly. And we should have positive views from that because it shows that we are developing faster.
Though failing to meet Vietnam's expectation, WTO and the TPP have set standards and already become the template for global trade rules. They also lead the way in building the new trade and investment paradigm for Vietnam. So what do you think about this?
FTA today is the fourth generation already. Not only commodities or service, it is very high in standard. TPP, for example, we talk about labor standard improvement. We talk about environment, transparency, or anti-corruption. These kind of things are new paradigm for Vietnam, not only in trade or investment, it is in development in general. So we see Vietnam is, even though quite low at development level, but we are quite straightforward and quite fast to adapt to this new paradigm.
Put those things together, will Vietnam still confirm its determination to liberalize trade in the time to come?
I think so. With or without TPP, the Vietnam trend of integration will continue because we benefit from it. An open society, open economy in Vietnam now receiving more investment, more moving in manufacturing. The problem for us is how to manage it, not whether or not we continue the integration. This is non-disputable.
TPP is the first international trade agreement. Vietnam's negotiation teams have consulted with businesses. Initially, the United States wanted to secure the 12-year data exclusivity protection for its biological medicines. This would affect the production of generic drugs and curb the use of cheaper generic medicines in Vietnam.
Việt Nam và ngay cả Brazil là những nước mà chúng ta không có khả năng sáng chế ra thuốc mới và chúng ta chỉ có thể sản xuất được thuốc generic sau khi các bằng sáng chế phát minh thuốc mới đã hết hạn. Nếu mà cái thời gian bảo vệ sở hữu trí tuệ càng kéo dài bao nhiêu thì chúng ta càng không có cơ hội để sản xuất những thuốc đó.
During the TPP negotiation process, Vietnamese enterprises contributed comments to proposed negotiations on the data exclusivity period. After 19 former negotiation rounds, enterprises' wishes have been fulfilled.
Kết cuối cùng mà các nước hướng đến là cái thời gian bảo hộ hoặc là 8 năm hoặc là 5 năm cộng với một số cái biện pháp mà nước đó có thể áp dụng được để hướng đến cái 8 năm. Và đây là có cái phần linh hoạt cho các nước tùy theo điều kiện cụ thể của mình để hướng đến.
Businesses are set to play more active roles in future trade agreement negotiations, as the International Traders Law 2016 emphasized the need to consult businesses during negotiations. This effort will help Vietnam empower businesses when joining new trade agreements.
What strategy do you think Vietnamese companies should adapt to deal with the non-tariff barriers?
Number one, raising the standards in the production process. Second, adapt to the international and regional practice. But very importantly, they need to know the regulations of certain countries that they are operating in order to survive in a very complicated and competitive environment in the globalization process. They have to have long-term vision.
People say that globalization means globalization. What's your opinion on this? Would you have anything to add?
We have too many things to recommend from 3 pillars. Let's talk about the government. Streamlining the government in order to make it more efficient and adaptive, not only to integration or globalization, but also to climate change. It's very important. For the businessman, a startup community is very important, but not enough. We need big firms. For the people, vocational training, tertiary training, or education are the key. We are facing the big gap between demand and what we have. Vietnam have to do right away now, otherwise we will be left behind.
That's a very good point to close our program today. Thank you. With its unique geopolitical position, Vietnam will still maintain its determination to liberalize trade in the years to come. However, too many imponderables in the global trade paradigm over the past years and the near future have put the country at risk of losing its competitive advantages, thus require preparations in terms of legal frameworks and resources. Nonetheless, the reforms and preparations launched by the TPP, WTO, and recent trade occurrence will still improve Vietnam's domestic business environment and competitiveness. Furthermore, making domestic reforms to meet the high standards set down by the new generation free trade agreements will enable Vietnam to implement and benefit from the 10 FTAs already in effect, as well as any future FTAs. And that also wraps up this edition of BizLine. Thank you very much for watching. You can always rewatch our program at vtv4.vn or youtube.com/vtv4go. From our team here in Hanoi, until next time.